There's a lot of people who are confused about the way things should be capitalized. They're unsure of what the rules are. The rules are actually very simple, but when you make mistakes in this area, the impact of your writing can really be weakened. So we're going to review a few things. Let's talk about capitalization involving people and cultures. People's names and titles, the names of the languages they speak, and the religions they practice are all proper nouns and should be capitalized. Let's look at some examples. We have Toni Morrison. That's a writer. Her name is capitalized. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, former president, also capitalized. R.L. Stein, Lyndon B. Johnson, Sandra Cisneros, B.B. King. All of these are names, and they should be capitalized. You also capitalize titles and abbreviations of titles that are used before names or in direct address. For example, Professor Stevens, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Chief Justice William H. Rehnquist, Lieutenant Colonel Eileen Collins, and Sergeant Casper escorted Ambassador Nakamura to the dinner. So you use those capital letters in those situations. You also capitalize abbreviations of titles when they follow names. In these examples, Emilio Estefan Jr., Stephen Baker, CEO, Michelle Phillips, PhD. You capitalize a title of royalty or nobility only when it comes in front of a person's name. Queen Elizabeth, Sir Winston Churchill, King Henry, Count Victor. When you're talking about family relationships, you capitalize those words that indicate a family relationship only when they're used as parts of names or in direct addresses. Look at my examples. Aunt Ruth, that's someone's name, so you capitalize Aunt to go with that. Uncle Ed, same thing. Ed is someone's name, so you capitalize Uncle when you refer to Uncle Ed. And Grandma Johnson. This has her name, so you use a capital letter for Grandma. You don't capitalize a word that refers to a family relationship when it follows a person's name or it's used without a name. Look at my example here. Ben, my brother, likes writing poetry. Now, we're not going to capitalize brother because it comes after the name Ben. So even if we just said my brother likes writing poetry, we wouldn't capitalize it in that situation. You always, always, always capitalize the pronoun I. Look at the example. My friends and I had never been to a poetry slam before. Now, this is something that a lot of people let slide when they're talking in slang or they're writing in slang or texting. They don't capitalize the word I, but in any kind of professional or academic writing, you must capitalize the pronoun I. You also capitalize the names of ethnic groups, languages, and nationalities. You're also going to capitalize those when they're used as adjectives. Not only were you going to talk about English people, but you might talk about English class. That would be capitalized. Swahili, German, Cherokee, all of these words are going to be capitalized. You're also going to capitalize religious terms, denominations, sacred days, sacred writings, and deities. Let's look at this little chart that I've made. Religions like Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, all capitalized. Denominations like Sunni, Baptist, or Methodist, those are all capitalized as well. Look at the list of sacred days. All of these words use capital letters at the beginning, as well as with sacred writings and the deities themselves. Those are all going to take capital letters. Now let's move on and talk about capitalizing first words and titles. You always capitalize the first word in a sentence. Most lines of poetry, quotations, and outline entries are capitalized. You're also going to capitalize the greeting and the closing in letters and important words in titles. So let's look at some examples of that. Sentences and poetry. You're going to capitalize the first word of every sentence. Many people enjoy reenacting historical events. A lot of people let this go when they're using a word processor or when they're texting. And it's okay in very informal situations, but in any kind of academic writing, it's very important that you capitalize the first word of the sentence. Now look at this poetry. This isn't going to apply to all poetry, but in traditional forms of poetry, the first letter of each line will be capitalized. And this is an example of a traditional poem. So every line starts with a capital letter. You're also going to capitalize the first word of a direct quotation if it's a complete sentence. So let's look at this. The email said, "Is anyone interested in reenacting a battle?" The sentence, "Is anyone interested in reenacting a battle?" is a complete sentence. So when you quote it, you start it with a capital letter. You're not going to capitalize a direct quotation if it's a fragment, like in the example, "One player says reenactments are the closest we can get to time travel." The closest we can get to time travel is a fragment. Therefore, we're not going to start it with a capital letter in a quotation. If you have a divided quotation, you're not going to capitalize the first word of the second part unless it starts a new sentence. And I've got an example of each one of those. We have the costumes, the email continued, but we need history experts. This is a divided quotation. It's divided by the part that says the email continued. So it's not going to be capitalized at the second part. The word "but" is not going to be capitalized. The second example, "Join our group," the writer said, "You'll have fun." We have two sentences here. So the second part will be capitalized because it begins a new sentence. Parts of a letter. Now, you guys should know this because we write letters all the time. You capitalize the first word of the greeting. Now these are very formal greetings, sir or madam, but you would say dear whomever you're writing to. And also the first word of the closing, whether it's sincerely, whether it's love, whichever way you choose to go, you would capitalize the first word of that greeting. Now, making an outline. An outline is a really good way to organize a type of writing, an essay, or even a persuasive essay, so that you know exactly what you're going to do and in what order. When you write an outline, you capitalize the first word of each entry, as well as the letters that introduce major subsections. If you look at the little example I have here, you can see historical is capitalized. I've also capitalized the letter A and capitalized that heading, reenactments of events in American history. I've also capitalized the two parts underneath that. That's just a good thing to keep in mind when you're making an outline. When you're writing a title, you're going to capitalize the first word and the last word and all important words in a title. You're not going to capitalize conjunctions. Conjunctions are words like and, by, for, except if they're the first word of the title. Same is true with articles, a, an, and the. But if they're the first word, they will be capitalized. Some examples, let me show you. Books, The Catcher in the Rye, The Old Man and the Sea. Now, in both of these, we have an example of an article that starts the title, so it must be capitalized. And we have an example of either an article or a conjunction that's not capitalized in the middle of the title. But you can see that the main words of any type of title are going to be capitalized. Let's talk about places and transportation. When you're talking about a specific place, a celestial body like a star or a planet, a landmark, or a vehicle, you're going to capitalize those words. This is a pretty substantial list here, but go ahead and take a look at it. Geographical names, the divisions of the world, the Arctic Circle, the Northern Hemisphere, the continents, major bodies of water like the Pacific Ocean or Lake Michigan, islands like the West Indies, mountains, the Alps, Mount Rainier, landforms, the Grand Canyon, the Rock of Gibraltar. All of these are going to be capitalized. You're also going to capitalize directions when they name a particular region of the country or world or their parts of proper names. Look at my example. Interesting festivals are held all over the country, from the West Coast to the East Coast, in the North and in the South. Now, because we're saying the West Coast and the East Coast, those are capitalized. The same as with the North and the South. That's why those are done with capital letters. You capitalize the names of planets and other specific objects in the universe. Here's just a couple of examples. Halley's Comet, Venus, Pleiades. These are specific objects, so they would be used with a capital letter. You don't capitalize sun and moon. You capitalize Earth only if you're using it with other capitalized astronomical terms. You don't capitalize Earth when it's preceded by a V, or when it's talking about land or soil, because that is another word for soil or even dirt. Of all the inner planets, only Earth and Mars have satellites. So in that case, because it's linked with Mars, you would use it with a capital letter. When you're talking about buildings, bridges, and landmarks, you're going to capitalize those if it's the name of a specific one. You can see my examples: the Washington Monument, the Empire State Building, London Bridge, the Gateway Arch. Those use capital letters. If you're talking about specific names of planes, trains, or other vehicles, for example, Flyer, that was the Wright brothers airplane. Trains like the Super Chief or the City of New Orleans. Ships, the USS Constitution. Anything that has a specific name is going to be given a capital letter. Now let's talk about capitalizing the names of organizations and other subjects. You capitalize the names of organizations, historical events, and documents, as well as months, days, and holidays. So let's look at some examples. These are organizations: the University of New Mexico, the National Association of Manufacturers. Those are going to be capitalized, so you need to keep that in mind. When you abbreviate organization names, you capitalize those letters. Look at my examples. ABA, the American Bar Association. UCLA stands for the University of California at Los Angeles. Those are also capitalized. When you're talking about historical events or historical periods or documents, you capitalize those. Got some examples here: the American Revolution, the Declaration of Independence, the Middle Ages. All of those are used with capital letters. Then there's certain abbreviations dealing with time and the calendar that are also capitalized: BC, AD, BCE, CE, AM, and PM. Those all have to do with time and the calendar. You're also going to capitalize the names of months, days of the week, and holidays, but you don't capitalize the names of the seasons: winter, spring, summer, and fall. Those don't get capitalized. When you're talking about special events or special awards or brand names, those are also capitalized. Most everybody watches the Super Bowl and the Olympics. Those are all used with capital letters. So that's an important thing to keep in mind also. Now, when you capitalize brand names, you capitalize the name that's the brand, but you don't capitalize the common nouns that follow it, such as strong stick adhesive tape. You wouldn't capitalize adhesive tape. That's just a common noun. Same with Power Pack batteries. You capitalize the brand name, Power Pack, but not the common noun, batteries, that follows it. When you're talking about school subjects, you're going to capitalize those names only when they refer to specific subjects, like American history, French, or American History 1. You wouldn't capitalize geometry, algebra, things like that. You're going to capitalize the words freshman, sophomore, junior, or senior when you're using it as part of a proper noun or in a direct address, like in the example: the senior council will meet next Thursday, or please take your seats, freshmen. In those cases, you would capitalize. So capitalization, as I hope you've seen, doesn't have to be complicated. Just follow these few simple rules, and all your capitalization mistakes will be a thing of the past.